as much as it's going to pain the Conservatives and all those who will tell you that this is a really bad idea, well, there's been a lot of talk recently about how the Tories want to do even more radical things in order to bypass whatever planes are willing to be bothered to get off the ground to go to Rwanda, and that is by pulling out of the European Convention of Human Rights. So, on human rights, I should say. So, I feel like before people jump to the conclusion and say that this is the only way, it should also be reminded, ladies and gentlemen, that if we were to pull out of this as well, then we'll be pulling out of other things as well, or things will be pulled away from us in due course. So let's go through this one step at a time. First of all, what is the European Convention on Human Rights? It was drafted in the aftermath of the Second World War and the Holocaust in an attempt to protect the people from the state, make sure the atrocities committed would never be repeated, and safeguard fundamental rights. Exhibit A, who's to say these things won't happen if we leave this? You know what I mean? Because there won't be any legislation, there won't be people stepping in to say, you can't do that. Because, again, if without rights, then who's going to stop them? The United Kingdom played an important role in the birth of the ECHR, with British lawyers integral to the drafting of the text. Once again, the Conservatives, not just because of Sir Keir Starmer, they don't like lawyers very much, ladies and gentlemen. They don't like people who uphold and are upstanding members of the community and for who actually fight for justice. And Winston Churchill, a key early advocate. The ECHR guaranteed people's fundamental human rights in law for the first time. The rights we are all accustomed to come from the UK signing the convention. Since the UK signed the convention in 1951, it has protected us from things like torture, killing, and slavery, and ensures our freedom of speech, assembly, religion, privacy, and much more. So that they sound pretty good to me, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you want to see those things go? Wouldn't you love to know the fact that pulling out of this would mean that being starved to death, for example, we aren't protected from it, and somebody could walk away scot-free because, you know, who's to say that they're gonna bat an eyelid at this? What is the European Court of Human Rights? The European Court of Human Rights enforces the ECHR. In other words, it makes sure that the rights given by the convention are protected in practice. Until the Human Rights Act was passed in 1998. The only way that people in the UK could enforce their rights was to take a case against the government to the ECHR in Strasbourg. Between 1951 and 2000, the ECHR found many human rights violations by the UK government against UK citizens. Now with the Human Rights Act in place, human rights cases are heard in domestic courts, saving a large amount of time and money for both individuals and the state. Cases that have gone through UK courts can still be appealed to Strasbourg, but the ECHR now finds many fewer violations because the HRA allows our own judges to take care of them before it goes that far. What does the ECHR have to do with the European Union? Nothing. The ECHR was launched by the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is older than the European Union and not connected to it. Confusingly, the Council of Europe is also not the same as the European Council, which is an institution of the European Union. 19 of the 46 members of states of the Council of Europe, including the United Kingdom, are not members of the EU. What have the ECHR and ECHR ever done for us? There have been several important cases that have gone to the ECTHR which have protected and advanced human rights in the UK. Freedom of expression for the press comes from a case known as Sunday Times from 1979. The discrimination of homosexual acts in Northern Ireland came about thanks to a case called Dudgeon from 1981, a case called Smith and Grady made clear that banning LGBT plus people from serving in the armed forces breaches human rights. Since the Human Rights Act came into force in 2000, we can enforce the Convention rights in our own domestic courts, but the ECHR still acts as a backstop, making important judgments related to religious freedom, EWIDA, disabled people deprived of their liberty, HL, protest, Gillian and Quinton, and more. The ECHR and the Human Rights Acts protect us every day. The HRA insists that public authorities such as government departments, local councils, police, schools, certain care providers and prisons must act in a way that is compatible with the Convention rights. In this way, we are protected long before something ever gets to court. The ECHR is a living instrument, which means that the rights protected in it will develop over time in accordance with charges to social norms, etc. For example, a case called Goodwin established the right to change one's legal gender in the UK. Staying in the ECHR and retaining the HRA means that our human rights protections can also continue to evolve with the times. What would leaving the ECHR mean for international human rights? Leaving the ECHR and reining on our obligations would undermine the UK's credibility in criticising human rights abuses abroad, whether that is in Ukraine or China. It would also prevent us from being able to influence the way the ECHR judges human rights cases. It would also risk setting a precedent for other countries to violate individuals' rights or to leave the ECHR, which would be a major backward step for international human rights. What are politicians proposing? After the European Court of Human Rights grounded the first planned flight of refugees to Rwanda, some politicians have raised the possibility of the UK leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. This would make the UK the first nation to voluntarily withdraw from the ECHR. The only other European nations not signed up to the ECHR are Belarus and Russia, which has been expelled because of Putin's invasions of Ukraine. If we left the ECHR, what would this mean for ordinary people in the UK? Leaving the ECHR would put everyone's rights at risk. Yes, not just yours, but, your parents, your children, your loved ones, your uncles, your aunties, your grandparents, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins, your neighbours, your friends, your best friends, your girlfriend, your wife, the people you work with, the people you see every single day, the people who get on buses, the people who get in taxis, the people who go into shops, the people who sit on the corner streets of big cities. Everybody would be affected by this. The government leaving the ECHR would put everyone's rights at risk. The ECHR is a person's last resort for holding the state to account when it has abused their rights. The government is already planning to weaken human rights in the UK through its rights removal bill, which will make it much harder for people to get justice if their rights have been abused. Without the protection of the Human Rights Act or the ECHR, the UK government would have the power to do whatever it wants to individuals' rights with no threat of consequences. Circa 1984. Leaving the ECHR would also breach the Good Friday Agreement, which requires that the convention be directly enforceable in Northern Ireland. This would threaten the peace settlement. And I will say right now, ladies and gentlemen, there's actually an awful lot more to actually go about this. For example, if you want to look for advice on things like human rights, we could do an entire video about that another day. And we'll also argue about what are my rights on this. And I think this is the sort of thing that's useful because it's not just, it protects an awful lot of people, ladies and gentlemen. And it just seems fair. I mean, these aren't just the rights of minorities. These are the rights of people like you and me. Like I said, this covers everybody. And when a government puts forwards these sorts of suggestions and thinking that it doesn't matter what we think about it and they're just going to do whatever they want, trust me, there's something not quite right going on. And again, The only way we could actually possibly leave the Court of Human Rights is if we held a referendum about it. But once people actually look into this, and like I said, the Tories will not want this, but once people look into this, they'll realise very, very quickly, no, this is the worst thing we could have possibly have done, and will simply say, we're not doing it. So, there you are. And I hope to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.